Welcome to the XY Advisor podcast. To join a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice, head to xyadvisor.com. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Spider ETFs. From ETFs to model portfolios, Spider relentlessly pursues new ways to provide solutions to investors' most complex investment challenges. And for investors who want to align their values to their investment strategies, the Spider S&P ASX 200 ESG Fund, or E200, could be a sustainable alternative to Australia's flagship benchmark. This material is general information only. Investing involves risks, including the risk of principal. Investors should consider the PDS available at ssga.com before making an investment decision. Products issued by State Street Global Advisors, Australia Services Limited, AFSL number 238276, ABN 420039142225. G'day, how's it going? What do you know, Striker Like Clayton here from XY, getting to chat to Glen from Fox and Hare. My man, good to see you.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you too.
Yeah. So I was chatting the other day about setting up a practice and the amount of work that goes into just getting it off the ground. And it recalled me to the time where you and Jess, before you launched, there was such an obscene amount of work that went into before, anyone even considered becoming a client. I was out of the industry. I was looking at, I was like, my God, if this is the competition, I'm retiring now on top, because it's either now I walk out, on top, or 2 years from now, all my clients are gone. And I'm obviously being facetious, but the amount of work that you did put in was awesome. And it's so cool now to sort of look back a handful of years later and be like, all right, well, that worked.
Yeah. So we, before we launched, so Jess and I, the whole concept of Fox and Hare came about. We were both BDMs in Macquarie. We used to look after similar turf. We actually did a lot of work looking after kind of advisors in regional New South Wales. So road trips out to Dubbo and Bathurst and Orange, and got to a point where we were like, on a 5-hour road trip, you get to know each other, and we're just having a chat, like what's next. And that's where Fox and Hare was born. So before we launched, for about 2.5 years, we'd catch up every single week talking about everything from the name to the experience to running focus groups with ideal members, talking about, what they would expect from an advisor, what do they think of advisors, would they go see an advisor, what our office would smell like just random shit like that. Because we were like super excited about kind of building this business. So yeah, you're right. There was quite a long lead time before we even signed that first member on.
Yeah, which was so impressive. And like I said before, to now see how it's worked out. I mean, you just briefly mentioned that your team's expanded in the last few days or weeks.
Yes. Well, so Fox and Hare turns 3 on the 23rd of October, which is super exciting. 2 years ago, it was just Jess and I. About 12 months ago, we had 1.5 support staff. At the moment, there's 10 of us in the business, and we've just hired an associate advisor and 2 quite experienced advisors as well. So from just Jess and I 3 years ago, as of next week, we'll be 13.
Man, that is so amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, amazing, overwhelming, exciting, scary, everything you can kind of think of.
But I mean, like off the top of my head, here's one thing that you guys do really differently to anyone else. For example, meetings early in the morning, even on a weekend, is totally fine.
Yeah, so I start my workday at 5:30. I am a morning person. Our members get me at my best in the morning. I don't start doing client member meetings until 7 o'clock in the morning. But look, I tap out by about 6. Like I'm not an evening person. Jess is actually the opposite. She prefers to kind of start a day slow, but she gets a lot of work done at the end of the day. And we are still doing member meetings on Saturday mornings as well.
That's to me, that was always one of the really distinguishing factors. And what a small thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like to make as a distinguishing factor. And yet I don't know anyone else that does it. And so to me, that was just such a wow, your entire experience down to the fact that you're available when typically a lot of people struggle to get time availability, except on a weekend. And so you and Jess said, well, actually, rather than trying to fight that, what we'll do is we'll just facilitate that. And that's, I mean, such a small thing realistically, but it's had such a, it sends such an amazing message for nothing.
Just being flexible. And again, everyone's different, but for these advisors that are just joining us now, there'll be the same level of flexibility, understanding, obviously, we can't be expecting them to work, six days a week. But if they want to take a Monday off and they work the Saturday, I'm cool with that. Like, that doesn't matter. Just work in what your diary in with the members' diary, and kind of meet on common ground. Yeah.
No, look, I mean, it's one of many things that I think is such an amazing example of what, the new breed of advisor does, right? So I love everything that you guys are doing over there. Now, the reason why I got you on specifically today is ESG. So ESG is, we've done a short 5-part series before. We're doing another 5-part series now on ESG investing. And I've got to say, it is bigger than you imagine, but it's still relatively early in let's call it mainstream adoption. So we're not talking that it's massive at this stage, but it's to a point where you're getting more and more products are releasing. I should say more and more brands are releasing products, and it's getting a little bit the standard of what meets an ESG investment now is constantly increasing. But I think the realization that capitalism is the solution to a lot of the problems that we see in the world, rather than it being the enemy, is sort of a movement, I would say, that's really been adopted. I myself truly do think that entrepreneurs are there to solve the world's problems. We're not there to create problems for the world. And using capitalism to change the world, I think is a much better concept, and it's much more effective than just, say, picking up a poster that says, don't burn down the something, right? Like, whatever that is, it's okay. But when Australian Super comes around and goes, well, actually, you just bombed that ancient Aboriginal site that was really important, well, now heads are got to roll. And so there's two different methods, and one has a much greater chance of success. And I kind of think that is where the conversation is going. And if I think about where you guys are placed as a business, that's always been pretty big for you, or at least you were some of the early adopters.
Not pretty big. It is front of mind.
Wow. Right.
And very, very front of mind, and also something that we consciously have conversations with, a significant number of our members. So just in terms of, to kind of give you context for the demographic we work with, 80% of our members would be in their 30s. So people reach out to us when they're like, oh yeah, I'm starting to earn some pretty good money, I got to get my shit sorted. That is Fox and Hare members to a T. And if we think about that demographic, with all the climate change rallies, here in Australia, there was 300,000 people that went to those climate change rallies, which seemed like a lifetime ago now. But they were also held around the world in over 150 countries, right? Yeah. So millions of people were turning up to these, with many of those being students, some of them being as young as kind of 8 years old. And these people are going to be the teachers and the politicians and the CEOs of tomorrow. So that trend towards kind of ESG and that kind of social environmental responsibility is really front of mind for this demographic. And interestingly, so the Responsible Investment Association of Australia estimates that nearly $3 trillion Australian dollars, 3 trillion Australian dollars is invested in ethical strategies around the globe.
Yeah, right.
And growing.
Yeah.
So this is front of mind for us because of the demographic, I would suggest, because of the demographic that we work with, but that demographic is only going to expand.
Yeah. The amount of research that I've done and been lucky enough to sort of learn as I've been doing these ethical investment series, the large majority of the conversation, or actually the large majority of people, when they think ESG, they think of the E. It's the first one. And I think I saw somewhere that essentially 80% of the investment decisions of why people are attracted to environmental, social, and governance investments is because of the E. I think one of the interesting things about, being gay is that you can focus maybe more on the S. I think you've probably got more of a tilt because I know
more of a bend, you could say.
Potentially, correct. And so undoubtedly, and we've spoken about this in the past, like you have attracted, that audience as well, right? Specifically, and you've gone after it. And so how much of a role has the S played in your investment decisions as well? Because a lot of people can talk to the E, but I was kind of interested to find out what are the conversations and what are the attraction mechanisms on the social element of the ESG strategy?
Yeah. So if we think about what is the social, so this is if you kind of try and define it, it's around examining how a company manages its relationship with employees, suppliers, customers, and the communities in terms of where it operates. So if we think of it from kind of that LGBTIQ lens, then that social criteria could be supporting companies that supported marriage equality, for example, here in Australia.
Right.
So and so if you looked at some of those companies that signed off on kind of the petition, etc., there was talk within the LGBT community to support those companies. So it's sometimes referred to as kind of the pink dollar, but spend that pink dollar in those companies that are actively supporting us, and to the same token, actually avoid those companies that are maybe don't have the same values as the community.
Wow.
If you think beyond that, so we have a lot of conversations with a lot of young women looking to invest, again talking about this concept around ESG. If we think about the concept of social, we need to think about the concept of gender equality.
Yes.
And also looking at, are these companies that we're investing in, do they have a diverse board? Is their leadership diverse? Do they have significant kind of pay gap issues? And then if we kind of build upon that, we hosted an ethical event last year, and one of the panelists was for a company that kind of looked at fair trade around the coffee industry. So this is again starting to have that conversation around the supply networks and things like that. So environment is very front of mind for a lot of people, but the social is still something that I think we're probably having conversations about, but maybe not as front of mind when thinking about it from an investment perspective. But there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be also taking that into account when determining where to invest our money.
Yeah. Do you guys? So there are some people that brand themselves as an ethical, it's in the name, right? So, ethical financial planning, for example, right? So you guys chose one of the greatest names I've heard for financial planning, Fox and Hare. Actually, who came up with that? Which one out of you two?
Neither of us. So it was actually one of our much more creative friends. She came up with a name. She spoke to Jess, and Jess was like, "Oh my God, that's it." Jess called me. I was like, I'm not sure, but then it just takes me a little while to warm up to things, but now I absolutely love it.
Yeah. No, fair enough. But it's not something that like if I go onto your website, it's not the first thing I come across, right? It's not Fox and Hare ethical investment, for example. It's and essentially all of your outward facing communications, or not so like when you guys do PR, I see it a bit sort of turn up there, but like it's not exactly the first thing. So what's kind of interesting is like you connect with the client on an individual basis, and I think intelligently, that's to do with them. What are their goals? What do they want to achieve? And the focus is very much on them. Now, the question then is, and kind of interesting as I go along this sort of learning about ethical investing, the awkward part or the potential for an awkward part is arriving at the question of ethical investing, right? And so because now, obviously, if it's in your business name, well, then it's implicit and there's no, there's no conversation that's around it. But in a situation where your branding and your focus is on the individual rather than the investment philosophy, and so people are walking in because they're attracted to what you can do for them. And so I feel like the conversation then is positioned in a way that's very similar to anyone else, right? Any other company that's out there, right? And so how then do you introduce the topic of ethical investing, and how do you avoid the off chance that someone goes, oh no, I'm not interested in that, and then the awkward silence, and then they're assuming that you're judging them and that experience?
So one simple question that we ask all of our members when they kind of first sign up, is there anything you don't want to invest in?
Cool. That's a good question.
And that is a really, they could go, no, nothing. Or they could say, armaments, animal cruelty, gender equality, etc. And then that's when we build out that conversation. Because you're quite right. You don't want to go, do you want to invest ethically? Because that's really putting someone on the spot. But if you say, if it is something that they're conscious about, if they're concerned about, if it is something that they want to address, asking the question, is there anything you don't want to invest in, then that will come up.
Awesome. That's
worked really well for us.
Yeah, that's a great way to introduce it. I like that. Let's say, for example, someone says a really complicated mix, right? Which undoubtedly is going to happen. So then how do you deal with, because of the different levels, right? So some people just go, well, actually, I don't want to make money from any company that has anything to do with war, like with bombing someone. And you go, okay, well that's, but then it might be, all the way. I mean, there's just so many lenses that you can
animal cruelty, gambling, alcohol, junk food, gender equality, LGBTI.
So how do you deal with it? How do you, because at the end of the day, as the advisor, you've got levers, but there's only so many levers that you can pull. How do you sort of take that conversation and do your job as the advisor to do the trade-off and get them in a position where they're still within the bounds that they need to be, but they're really happy where they're at, even if it's at the expense of they didn't get everything they want?
Totally. So we've built an ethical portfolio that's made up of a number of ETFs that has a really extensive screening criteria. So it's looking at both positive and negative screens. So negative screens, so those doing damage, positive screens, like screening those companies in that aren't doing positive. And it has a really transparent screening process. And it is very, very broad and in terms of what it's looking at. So there are, I suppose, sometimes I refer to those that have kind of a couple of screens almost as greenwashing. So, you screen out fossil fuels or you screen out armaments, but then it's got companies in there with terrible supply chains, no focus on their employee engagement and things like that. So that's kind of, I would argue, to some extent, kind of very diluted screening, whereas we've kind of gone and built this portfolio that is very, very, how would I put this? It's really stringent in terms of the screening. And then what that means is it meets to date, it's met everyone that's kind of reached out to us. It's met
Wow.
their relevant criteria.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Do you get to situations where someone only wants a certain exposure to ESG, and do you? I guess the question is, do you guys have it or use the ESG if someone is as a core, or do you only ever focus it on as a satellite or entire portfolio, or how do you sort of run it?
Good question. So probably two answers to that. So the first is it usually is core, because if someone doesn't want to invest in armaments, like whether it's, you're looking at the core or the satellite, they don't want to invest in armaments.
Yeah, totally.
Whether it's 50% or 100%.
Yeah.
However, when investing ethically, there typically is a price premium that funds and ETFs do charge. So we do need to take the individual circumstances into consideration in terms of how much they are investing. Because again, we don't want to be diluting their funds balance and things like that with significant fees. So in some circumstances, it might be a conversation of, understand you want to invest ethically. These are the costs associated with that. And then they might decide, actually, you know what, that's pretty expensive. Maybe I'll just wait until my balance is a little bit higher and those fees aren't as such a huge percentage of the current balance. So, any approach, we will always show the member the different options. Like, this is if we invest ethically, this is if we look at, I suppose, a portfolio without those ethical screens. And then it's really for, talking through kind of the risks and et cetera, and then they really decide which they feel more comfortable with.
Yeah. Okay.
Because one of the risks that's often associated with investing ethically is there probably isn't the same track record or, historical data that we have like your more traditional funds. And again, the members need to be across that. But yeah, it does come up in conversation, and it's just about showing them the options, and then they really decide what feels right for them.
Awesome. Pivoting just ever so slightly, one of the most amazing things I've ever seen a financial planning outfit create is the roadmap. Now, what your and Jess's roadmap I found was a really, really interesting. And I think even at one stage, it was either introduced or it was, the idea was flirted with, but it didn't come to being. I have to ask, after, seeing it quite a while ago, is there still a completion date, so to speak? I remember the concept of, like 5 years down the line, or if it was 10 years down the line, or this idea. And again, I'm not sure if you ever implemented it, but this idea that you would get clients to a certain point and then they would need to then almost agree to opt in and keep going. But there was kind of a graduation you were sort of trying to get people to.
Yeah, so that's kind of never eventuated. But what we've kind of noticed now, having operated for 3 years, a number of members have, joined Fox and Hare and subscribed for kind of 2 years, and then they've kind of gone, look, Glenn, my strategy is now to get rid of some of this huge mortgage that I've just embarked on. And they might go, cool, thank you so much for all your help, and then they cancel their subscription. But they always leave on good terms. And we know in 3 to 5 years time, if they deviate, and we have a kind of a process of reaching out with them on an annual basis, hey, still here if you need us, if anything's changed, or if they feel like they're not sticking to the strategy that we put forward, they would then reach back out to us. And we've had that already. So we've had, members that, they joined in the first kind of 12 months and they felt like their strategy was working for them and they just needed to stick to it. And then they've subsequently reached out and said, oh, look, we're probably not across our finances as much as we were 3 years ago. So we need to be, and this is something that Jess and I kind of talk about all the time, our programs are designed to be flexible. And, if the situation or their strategy is just for the next 5 years, keep doing more of the same because, they don't envisage their circumstances or goals changing, then it's okay if they self-select out, because we know that in due course, they will self-select back in when things kind of change in their world. So there's no graduation date as such, but there's complete flexibility in our subscription model.
Yeah, it was, I think we spoke about it. It was quite early on. It was an idea that was floated, I think, once. And I always thought to myself, well, I really have to chase that up to see if they ever ended up doing it. Mate, you've got, I mean, just to see what it was like with you and Jess pre-opening. And then, I mean, we like to catch up. I guess we get to catch up on an annual basis at this stage because life's pretty busy. Yeah. But it's been so cool and so amazing. And certainly you've even outdone the expectations that I personally thought that you guys would achieve. And I thought that you would achieve quite well, but just to see what's occurred and how it's being rolled out, it's one of those really good news stories, I think, for financial advice in general. If there's ever that worry that, because financial advice is changing so much, that it's going to make it uneconomic to get advice. Well, I mean, looking at a company like Fox and Hare or similar ones that are out there, and no matter how good your business is, you can only handle so many clients, right? So it's not like because you guys are doing so well that no one else could ever reach that precipice either. There's so many people that need advice, and I just think advisors like you and Jess are really sending a great message to market. And so congratulations, man. Like, I know I probably say it too much whenever we catch up, but I just love what you guys have achieved.
Yeah, we're really fortunate, and the advice industry has been really supportive of what we're trying to kind of build. And we have quite a number of advisors that actually refer us people that, aren't appropriate for their business. If they have someone in their 30s that doesn't have a lot of wealth, but, earning good, six figures and is just blowing it all, that is a perfect client for Fox and Hare, right? Yeah. But it may not be a perfect client for a firm that's kind of traditionally working with pre and post retirees.
Yeah.
Interestingly, so the associate advisor that just joined us last week, he came from, I suppose, a more traditional financial advice firm. And he was like, God, you guys spend a lot of time on cash flow. And I was like, yeah, because if our members blow everything that they earn, then we've got nothing to invest anyway. People are reaching out to us because they've gotten to a point, they're earning good money, and they're like, I really need to do something with it. They're not reaching out to us because they've got copious amounts of wealth and they want to, take a step back from work and, start kind of that transition. It's a very different experience that I guess our members go through.
Yeah, it's a whole... Financial planning has graduated beyond the concept of the lump sum of money, whether that's a lump sum of investment or the lump sum of debt, right? So it was always, the revenue was always attached to these lump sums of insurance, right? These are lump sums. And now it's, someone can have no lump sums, but just have a high income of revenue. And traditionally that was a horrible client, but realistically it's a great client because now you've got someone who, you can help grow their wealth and then invest it and then, take on a house. And there's a bunch of things. I mean, those kind of clients they're attracted to financial planning as well. And they probably have more of an immediate need, an immediate desire because they're looking at so much money just going through their bank accounts. And, I mean, an advisor putting their hand up and saying, hey, you're an intelligent human. You've clearly done well to get here, but I get help from other people who specialize in other things. And I'm sure if you want to get help to go from here to here, you can ask me as well. And that's kind of what I'm here to do. It's valuable. It's obvious. It's the kind of financial planning where people go, oh yeah, that's financial planning. Like, so many people question, well, what is financial planning? How do you, what happens if you just help people with their day-to-day money? Like it's a pretty clear and obvious answer.
Totally. And I mean, I think about, so I had a meeting 7:00 this morning, young couple, she's pregnant. She's not working at the moment. She's studying full time. He is on 200 grand a year. They have 50 grand in the bank account. they've just bought a property and they're kind of starting to pay down that debt. And they're just like, what more can we be doing? Like, what else should I be doing? And that's a perfect member for us, because it's, she's concerned that they have no grasp on kind of cash flow. And then, she wants to start work once she, has the kid, and like, then they want to upgrade their house, but they're like, oh, and he's got 4 super funds because he used to work at Woolies and all this kind of stuff. And they're just like, and he hasn't done his tax return in 3 years. Like, people are constantly put their finances on the back burner.
Yeah.
The conversation just needs to be, bring it to the forefront, be proactive. And, the common thread across all of our members is that their income and disposable income is increasing, which is really exciting. And it's a conversation around, okay, if your income's increasing, what are we doing with that extra income? And the second of all is, all our members have time on their side. So that the common thing is, the sooner you get your shit sorted, the far better off you're going to be in the long run. So the challenge with the demographic that we work with, and this is kind of all of our marketing talks to, well, what does an advisor actually do? How can an advisor actually help someone in their early 30s? And the assumption is that advice is just for old rich people.
Yeah, totally.
So, if we can kind of break down those 3 barriers to entry, then you're going to get people thinking, going, oh, maybe I should think about this, which is kind of what's worked really well for us.
Yeah. I mean, how do you get people, because I assume that message is on your website.
Mm-hmm. So our messaging is always, sorry.
How do you get people to go to your website? What do you find as the number one, if you want to call it, lead generator, which, it's not always the best way to call it, but how do you, if your messaging is on your website, what's your best method to get people to see that messaging?
So I'm just going to log into our fancy little dashboard here. So at the moment, 27% of our members come through from, so this is converted members, not prospects, but those that actually signed up. 27 are from referral partners.
Right.
Then we've then got about 16% come through the website.
Right.
And then, so 26 come through from existing members referring their friends and family, and then the rest would come through from social. All the messaging on our website, and that's predominantly LinkedIn. Yeah. But in terms of kind of the messaging on the website, and this probably comes back to the question around ESG as well, and how do they know that they should be reaching out to us for that kind of advice? Our messaging is always very inclusive. And what I mean by that is, we don't just work with LGBTI, we don't just work with young women. We don't just work with those that are looking to invest ethically, but focused on them as an individual. We work with everybody. Yeah. And our website doesn't say that we also work with young people. However, the way that we have branded it, the language we use, it just would not resonate with someone that was about to retire. Therefore, they don't reach out. We don't say we don't work with retirees. We just don't position our language and branding to that demographic.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So the front of the document, it doesn't have no oldies here.
Nah.
Right.
Ageist, so we might be ageist. I don't know.
You got to be careful. Mate, look, with respect to your time, I'm so glad, it's almost embarrassing. It's taken so long for me to interview you one-on-one like this. It's been, it's been so awesome to see what you do for your clients and do for the industry as a whole, mate. So congratulations on all the success so far. Loved having you on, and looking forward to catching up hopefully sometime soon.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
All right. Cheers. Take care.